Good evening. In Thai we say สวัสดีค่ะ Okay, สวัสดีค่ะ like this. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and the distinguished guests. Welcome to the 15th International Conference on Language and Social Psychology, ICLASP, and the 5th Language in the Realm of Social Dynamics, LIROD, conference. This evening, we have a glorious opportunity to have with us His Excellency Dr. Surin Pitsuwan, our honorary keynote speaker. His Excellency is a long-time Thai politician and professor emeritus who got his bachelor degree from Thammasat University, Thailand, before receiving his master degree in political science from Claremont College, California, and another master degree and Doctor of Philosophy in the field of Middle Eastern Studies and Political Science, respectively, from Harvard University. After having completed his degrees, he was a researcher for the Human Rights Studies Program, Thai Studies Institute and the Ford Foundation, the Rockefeller Foundation, Harvard University, and American University, Cairo. His Excellency also served as Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs between 1992 and 1995, and as Minister of Foreign Affairs between 1997 and 2001. Moreover, he's a former ASEAN Secretary General between 2008 and 2012, and the present Chairman of Future Innovative Thailand Institute. As you can see, he's the most active, open, and globalized ASEAN scholar who has become a rare and respectable leader of all time, I have to say, and has been invited to be a frequent keynote speaker at various international conferences. And tonight, it is such an honor to have His Excellency with us. We are ready to listen to his eloquent speech entitled Linguistic and Cultural Diversity in Thailand and Asean Countries. With that, ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming His Excellency, Dr. Surin Pitsuwan. Your Excellency.
Professor Aitesh, Professor Daruni, yes. Distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, I'm not sure if I'm glorious enough to earn that glorious introduction. Let me just say that my youngest boy returned from Cornell last night, where he's pursuing his PhD in economics, but it is game theory. I've read his master degree or MPhil thesis at Oxford, and the only page, the only line that I could understand was, "Thank you, Mom and Dad." The rest were formulae, and mathematical language. And my oldest boy is now at Oxford. They changed places. And he's taking up statistics for social scientists this summer at the University of Michigan. And the way they explained to me, they said, "Dad, everything is quantitative now." I said, if that is the case, I wouldn't be able to go to graduate school now. Because my time, it was Plato's dialogue that we had to read. It was Rousseau's social contract that we had to read. That's political science of my time. But now, everything is quantitative. And when I told the youngest boy that I was going to come here talking about language and diversity, he said, "Where?" I said, "At the University of Thai Chamber of Commerce." He said, "Where?" Language and diversity at the University of Thai Chamber of Commerce. What are you teaching here? But it is certainly an issue that everyone, let alone a person in public life like myself, that would have to deal with, would have to face, and would have to master of how to communicate effectively in the language, sometimes not your own. Sometimes definitely not a native language, but not even a working language, not even a secondary language. But politics is communication, diplomacy is communication, public policy is communication, because somehow you have to convince the people to decide that you are going to take them somewhere, to join that journey into a better future. That's what good politics is all about. To be able to paint a vision and convince your people that that vision is good for you, and that vision is where I'm taking you. That's good politics. So, Aristotle said, because we have reason, faculty of reason, we can speak. Because we can speak, we can communicate. Because we can communicate, we can somehow reason it out. What is a good life for this society, for this community, for this country? Now, I have been introduced as the immediate former Secretary General of ASEAN. 5 years. The office is in Jakarta. And in the charter, English is the working language of ASEAN. Meaning, I can only communicate with the leaders, with the diplomats, with the ministers. Meaning the large chunk of 622 million are outside of my linguistic reach. And yet I have been asked to help build this community. It's a tremendous challenge. When ASEAN was born on the 8th of August 1967, 50 years next year. When ASEAN was born, there was a telegram from the British Embassy in Bangkok, because it was born in Bangkok. And the message in that telegram was, these former colonies have tried many regional organizations before, but they have invariably failed in the past. This is from the British Embassy. This time, it seems to have some future prospect of success. But the last line is most relevant to you. But we, the British, who are British here, we the British, the Chargé d'Affaires sent a telegram back to Foreign Office. We, the British, don't have to give them any birthday gift, because we have given them the best gift of all, the English language. Talking about being patronizing. Huh? But I can imagine Professor Aitesh here sitting on that day in Bangkok, sending this telegram back to his whatever. No way. And I think you would have said, but they speak strange English languages here. Because each and every one of us speak our own form of English. There's Singlish in Singapore, you know that. There's Malayish in Malaysia. The Dutch, have given the Indonesians, a certain kind of accent. The Filipinos are hopelessly Americans when they speak English. The Thais are, I don't know where to put the Thais because they don't quite speak English that often. So, in order to communicate, in order to convince, in order to make sure that people understand what is the vision of the community, I am certainly being circumscribed. I am being restrained from communicating directly with the majority of the people. And yet, you are supposed to be building the community. Now the community is in being, is in existence. As of the end of last year, they made the announcement that there shall be a community called ASEAN. When we say we use English as our working language, it means we don't bother ourselves with translation like the European Union does. It means we don't spend money on translation, on copying papers. It means you come here, we speak in English. And if you can't speak in English, bring your own interpreters. And make sure whispering interpreters, because you don't want to interfere with anybody else who can communicate directly. But the landscape is not only English and non-English. In Indonesia alone, if they speak their own dialects, if they speak their own local languages, tribes, 400 dialects and languages. That's why they had to adopt the Malay language as their common language. Who are from Indonesia here? But they don't want to call it Malay. That would be admitting that we don't have our own. They call it Bahasa, which is the Bali word for language. This is Bahasa. Why did they accept the Malay language as their central common language in Indonesia? 17,000 islands, 400 ethnic languages. Why? Because the Malay language was the language of the merchants going by with their ships around those islands. And they all came from a small island south of Singapore called the Riau. Riau Island, a small island full of merchants, full of merchant ships, would go around the archipelago of Indonesia. Dutch didn't make it into the national language. Left to themselves, they won't be speaking any common language, but it is one language that every port city of Indonesia, every merchant would speak, and that is the Malay language of this Riau merchants going by ships, by boat, by their sail ships around the country, around the island, archipelago. That's how Malay was adopted as the common language of Indonesia. Now, 250 million people. plus those in Malaysia, plus those in Singapore, plus those in southern Philippines, plus those in southern Thailand. Over half of 620 million people of ASEAN speaks the Malay language, not Thai. Now, on such a landscape, and then we have to carry on what we call dialogue partnership with major countries around us, China, Japan, Korea. We call them the +3 countries to ASEAN 10. Then we have to speak to the Australian and New Zealanders who speak their own English. Then we have to speak to the Indians, 1.2, 1.3 billion of them, their own language, English. So, this is an extremely diverse landscape. No major language that, except China, if you count the number, but they're not being used in daily life everywhere, in the entire region. So, we have adopted the English language as the language of communication, as the language of diplomacy, as the language of commerce, as the language of trade, as the language of technology, transfer, science, and education. You can imagine the difficulty and the challenges that we have, particularly here in Thailand. The Thais take pride in the fact that they have been colonized, and they use that as a reason for the fact that the English is not good here. You see the twist logic. It's not the explanation, it's the excuse. But don't expect our language, our English to be good. We have never been colonized. The rest of ASEAN were colonies. So a sense of superiority, a sense of pride, which I think all the Thais have the right to have. But it is being used as an excuse not to be fluent in this language of Shakespeare. Now, in your field, tell me, how should I go about trying to put this community together? Language and social relations, language and social dynamics. I need to know more from you, because I have experienced tremendous challenges. So we want to standardize education, we have a problem. We want to make sure that we can communicate through the highest upper crust of every society, the ministers, the technocrats, the leaders. Even the leaders don't speak. When you can't really reach out to them, you can't build that sense of belonging. You can't build that sense of appreciation that the future belongs to every one of us. The future of my children will depend on this thing called the ASEAN community. You can't really bring it down to them. Communication is supposed to stir up the emotions. Communication is supposed to relate rationality and reasoning. You want to reason it out, why this direction is so important. So you reason it out through language. So language is an instrument of democracy. That's why rhetoric is so important to life in the public space since the Greek time, since Aristotle, since Pericles, who made that famous eulogy about the dead of Athens fighting to preserve what Athens stood for. But all the challenges that I have been facing are now being culminated in this little instrument. Because in the past, when I began my public political life, you communicated with your constituency. And before Bangkok would pay interest, or before Bangkok would hear of what you have said on the ground there, it would have gone through a few transmission processes. Now it's immediate. You say anything silly, it will be here. You say anything that makes sense, it will be here. Most of the time, it won't be there. Because social media is full of reaction to your mistakes, your mispronouncements. And yet we have to depend on it. Social media, this instrument of communication. If you don't use it, you will be outside of the network of communication. If you use it, you are not careful, you can be victims of misunderstanding. Oftentimes, that's what happened to public figures. So, IT, the Internet of Things, the information technology are now putting tremendous pressure on the vocation that people in public life are now pursuing, and that is trying to be communicative and good leader at the same time. What is good leadership? Good leadership is a good teaching leadership. Because you want to change behavior. Because you want to transform a society. Because you want to convince people that certain things you have to drop now and move on. Otherwise, you're not going to catch up with the rest of the world. You're not going to be competitive with the rest of the world. It's that transformation that you want to ignite in the body politics or in the people. And that has to come from the ability to communicate and the ability to teach. When I left the classroom to go into politics, I was asked by my colleagues at my university across town, so what's the difference between being a lecturer here and being inside the lion den? I said, I still consider myself a teacher. Only the classroom is noisier and bigger, and the issues are more complicated. Because in that structure, in that representative body, you have the widest spectrum of ideas, of ideologies, of philosophies, of the ways in which you want to construct your society, your community. So, but still, a teacher. Only the classroom has become much, much noisier, more crowded. And I think that is the challenge for all of you. And that is, in the crowded world, how do you coach Mr. Trump to speak constructively and positively, and would still be able to convince his constituents that his leadership will be good for the world. How can you coach the Prime Minister of Great Britain? Tomorrow is a vote. It's being crowded. It's no longer British kind of thing. It's European kind of things. And it's sending a lot of anxieties around the world. So it is not just a European, it is a global issue. So what I'm saying is, you may think, well, I mean, when my child heard about the topic that I'm speaking to you today, he might have thought that it is so esoteric. It is so specialized field. It is so unique. And it is only for those who are specifically interested in that particular little area, little field. And yet, I think you are dealing with a question that the entire humanity, global community, will need your answer, your advice, and your guidance of how to communicate to this 7.3 billion people on this little blue planet, which is getting very crowded and hot and borderless, flat. So it's no longer an issue that you want to publish in a journal, specialized field. But it is a question that 7.3 billion of us, and by the year 2050, there will be 9 billion of us. And there was a series by the BBC asking the question, how many human beings can this earth sustain? And the answer was, if all of us consume the same amount of resources, food and otherwise, as the people in India, this world can sustain 1.5 billion. We are 5 times over that. And on that basis, by the year 2050, we will need 5 more planet Earth for 9 billion people. Now, when the Labor Days and nights in Paris about the environment, and they agree in New York last September, this sustainable agenda for 2030, they assume that there is a sense of belonging on this planet, a sense of ownership on this planet. They assume that 7.3 billion people are going to join in on this journey to make sure that this little planet is sustainable. The question is, how are we going to communicate to 7.3 billion people that literally this earth, this world is running out of gas, literally. Because we don't have enough of everything. We don't have enough of anything. Now, in this realm of social dynamics, in this platform of tremendous tension and conflict and confrontation among us, diversified in every dimension, every meaning of that word, diversity. How can we devise a communication tool or a technique or a strategy, maybe in different languages, but how are we going to communicate so that we can inculcate, so that we can nurture that sense of common responsibility for this little planet together, 7.3 billion of us. If you look at it this way, what you are doing is more than just writing a piece of literature for peer review to be published in your journals. I think you are dealing with a most fundamental challenge and issue that the entire human family is facing. How are we going to understand each other, and how are we going to communicate with each other? How are we going to convince each other to take this journey together into the future so that this planet is safe? As far as I know, there is no plan B to go to another planet soon. As far as I know, there is no other planet waiting as a substitute for this one. No. This is it. We better take care of it. We better make it sustainable for the future generation. I look at some of the statistics from Europe. You have what? 508 million out of 28 countries in the European Union. You have 742.5 total in Europe. Here, 622, 10 countries in Southeast Asia alone, not counting China, not counting India. I look at Germany. I don't know if you are aware. Germany, in the middle of the year 2013, is 81.1 million. 35 years from now, Germany is going to be only 76.4. The population is going to go down. Germany. Great Britain is going to go up. Italy is up a little bit by 1 million. France is going to go up by 7 million. But the point is, on the whole, the growth, quick growth, big growth, is going to be in less and least developing parts of the world, where they need less, actually. What they need is job, not mouths to be fed. But that's not going to happen. There will be number growing there. The 2 billion that is going to increase from now until 2050 will grow in the less and least developed countries. And what are we going to do about it? And they speak not English. And they communicate not in a language that you and I would feel effective enough to communicate and to convince them. No. They speak in their own tribal small languages. And that's where the pressure, that's where the stress, that's where the tension will happen, will occur. That's why last year 1 million crossed the Mediterranean into Europe. That's why yesterday, the day before yesterday, UNHCR, United Nations High Commission for Refugees, said it's 65 million now refugees. 65 million people on the move. Not all of them are refugees, sorry, but 65 million people are on the move, migration. About 20 of them are refugees. So, do what you have to do, please. And that is, think of your vocation, your profession, as something that would also benefit the entire human species. Not just an esoteric subject that only few people would be interested in. But without your devotion and your dedication to the issue that you are looking into, whatever issues that you are talking about in the next 2 days, I think you are touching a very, very critical area of the species, and that is how to communicate effectively in order to create a sense of urgency, in order to nudge along a sense of belonging, in order to create a sense of global awareness and, yes, global consciousness. I'm speaking like the Dalai Lama now. But the more abstract the issue is, the more complicated the issue is, the more necessary the linguistic tool that you want to tell people like myself or younger generation who are coming behind, who would have to be responsible for their countries, for their states, for their societies into the future. Otherwise, we will be denied that benefit from you, from your labor, from your exercise, from your hard work. And we will be lost in confusion. Nobody is listening to anybody because nobody seems to make sense. And the people who have the pulpits, people who have the amplifiers, people who have the focus of attention, no matter how irrational, no matter how discriminatory, no matter how unrealistic, unhealthy the pronouncements are, people will only hear those. And rather than persuading them to be contributing good citizens of the world, they will become narrow and selfish and particularistic in their affairs, in their daily life, in their actions. And think about the human family. If that is the situation we will have to be in from now into the future. So I'm looking at you, I guess, as a what? As a group of individuals who come for the rescue. That is, help us understand the dynamics of our own rhetorics. The influence, the impact, negative or positive, constructive or destructive. What are we supposed to do and to learn and to steer our conversation, our dialogue, so as the best can be unleashed from the people. Not the worst elements, not the worst instincts inside them, not the most selfish, but the best in every individual must be able to be drawn out on to the public platform so that we can interact on that basis, so that we can compare on that basis, so that we can make selection on that basis. What are the best that could be brought out of 7.3 billion of us? Not what are the worst. I'll tell you, the issue is too big to leave them to the politicians. I would be the first to admit. Because politics, you're supposed to win. And oftentimes you ask, why do you have to go that far? And the answer is always, because I have to win. So I will use every tactic. I will adopt every strategy. I will try anything and everything the issue is too important, too big to leave them to the public figures, to the politicians, to the leaders, to the diplomats alone. We need an informed global public opinion. In order to do that, each and every society, every community, every country, every government will need people who could communicate constructive message effectively. Not communicate effectively, but destructive. You don't want that. And when you say constructive, means not just for yourself, not just for your country, not just for your society, not just whipping up a sense of nationalism, but nurturing a sense of common humanity. That's what we need going forward into the future. I don't envy your work, Mr. Aitesh, Mr. Daruni. I don't envy your work. I just want to give you this one very, very important dimension, and that is the implications of what you are doing is far-reaching. And humanity will be grateful, listening to you, learning from you, being guided by you. Good luck. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. From the audience, do you have any question? Please feel free, because we have the microphone in front of you.
Yes, please.
Okay. Actually, you can speak from here. Yeah.
Right. Thank you very much for your speech. I liked the idea of linking what we're doing as academics with what politicians and leaders are doing. The problem is that they usually don't want to hear what we have to say. At least that's my experience. Particularly if you're telling them something that they don't want to hear, which is what we're often doing because we're critical, because we have perhaps a social activism agenda that doesn't fit into their political agendas. So in my experience, I work with migrant workers, and in my experience, they really do not want to hear what we have to say. So what would you suggest then? Because you know what it's like to be on that side of affairs. So what would you suggest?
I would say they too are your listeners. They too are your clients. So you have to take them as part of the audience that you need to educate. Kofi Annan came up with this phrase, speak the truth to the leaders. Or is it speak truth to the leaders or something? Meaning you might not want to hear it, but in the final analysis, this is what you should be aware of. So you need to hear this message. It might not sound like music to your ears, but your people deserve a better alternatives, choices in policies, in pathways to the future. I don't think all politicians are, closed down or closed up. You just have to find the right ears, and you can make a difference. I have a movement going on now all around the country, but it started in my province in the south. And it's called living dams, living dikes. Because people are not going to wait for the government anymore, because the government would build the same size of dams and dikes, and they would spend about 6-7 million baht with cement, with iron rods. But now the people in the communities are building their own, what they call living dikes and living dams. And this movement now is attracting a lot of attention. And this is the movement that is going to respond to those who want to set aside a government budget for 6-7 million each dam so that there would be some kickbacks. But now the people are taking the matter into their own hands. And these are the people who are talking to themselves, among themselves, between themselves, and with their own local leaders. And rather than just dams, D-A-M, not D-A-M-N, dikes, they put the word living in front of it. How did they do it? I have all the photos here to show you. They would take bamboo piles and drill them into the water. And then they would make a square, and then they would put plastic bag with sand from the bottom of the river or of the stream and fill them up, one on top of each other, layers and layers, just like this room. And then the water would be kept up there, and the water would overflow, come down here. It would cost them 400,000 baht. They are taking the matter into their own hands. And they are growing these fig trees on top of those bamboo piles with leaves and branches growing from the bamboos and from the piles of dirt that they put in. Living because they are green. Living because the community life comes back. Living because there is a sense of ownership in the community. It's a fantastic movement going on. Now, they are speaking the truth between themselves. They are using their own local wisdom. No bureaucrats and politicians are going to fool them the next time around, that our way is better way than what you are doing. So, how did they become so resilient at that level in the communities on the ground? They speak to each other. They have dialogue. They have come up with this idea of talking it out, convincing everyone that you have an interest in this little thing. And now everybody has to take part, everybody has to contribute, everybody has to come and spend at least a day out of a week to build this little dam for our community. It's becoming alive in many, many ways, more than just living bamboo and living fig trees that they grow. So I guess what I'm saying is you have to be patient and you have to find the way and find the right constituency and find the right issues and find the right listeners. And then they will spread the truth of what you are saying. And then it will become a movement. And if politicians and bureaucrats don't catch up with them, they will be bypassed. Things like this happen in Europe. Things like this happen in education in Finland. Things like this happen to one of the Labour MPs in the UK who decided to take up the most difficult neighborhood and transform that school into one of the best schools in the city of London. So, I'm saying that there are those people who are willing to listen to you, how to communicate effectively. How to use the language to transform the dynamics of what is going on in education, in health, in drugs, in whatever it is. And that's what your contribution is going to be valued and appreciated. I think you can do it at different levels. Yes, with the leaders. Yes, with the politicians. Yes, with the bureaucrats. But the people, they can transform too. And once they transform, nothing is going to turn them around. That's what happened to China, by the way. We can laugh at it. They went through their cultural revolution. They lost a lot of lives, but they changed the country. We don't want to go that far. We would want to become that violent. But to transform a country, a society, you need a very, very effective communication strategy. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Any question from the floor? You still have time. Okay.
Yes,
Professor
yes.
over there.
What do you see as the role of empathy in bridging this language and cultural diversity in order that we can, I think, bring out the human strengths? Where do you feel that we can go, or how far can we take empathy?
Tolerance. Yeah, tolerance, empathy, a sense of appreciation of your problem. That's what you mean. Yeah, I think people must place their trust in us, that we are genuine, that we want to help, that we are willing to learn about their problems, and that we can show the way. I think in any mature democratic, you are from America. Is it a mature democracy now? I have a friend in Singapore who wrote an article, I think in the Financial Times. He said, Bernie Sanders and Trump would not happen here in Asia because we are not going to go to that extreme. I don't know if he's right, but he has a pretty good argument about it. He said it won't happen here. Anyway, I think in any what should I say? Any genuine form of democracy, people need to be convinced that you are on their side, that you understand their problems, that you are not going to mislead, that you are not going to turn around and disappoint them. And democracy, by definition, is diversity. That is, you have to deal with different ideas and different values, different norms. And I think if you can convince them that, yours is only one way forward that you can think of, but you are not going to deny anybody else to offer and propose the same things, because that won't be democratic. And let them choose. But first they have to feel that empathy. First they have to feel that genuine concern and that sincerity that you have for them and the predicament that they are in, and that you have a better solution for the future for them and their children. And that's why the rhetoric and public speaking skill is so important in a democracy. Because you want to reason it out, because you want to debate it out, you want to be compared, you want to be scrutinized, you want to be standing here and defending yourself, your ideas. And you want the majority of people to feel that, yes, he understands us. Yes, she understands us. Yes, she appreciates what we are going through. So that empathy is extremely important to be a part of that communication that you want to give out to the people. Yes. Please, and then the host.
I come from the country that's hopelessly American, and when we talk about democracy, even in Southeast Asia or in Asia, the language of democracy is English. And English, at least in what I know of the role of the English language in Southeast Asia, doesn't only make groups within the country different, it also makes the groups unequal. So the use of language is also a marker for inequality.
True. But the other way around, here in this country, English is also an equal and a social equalizer. My case, I came from the deep south. The other day I was in a department store looking at the sport section. A bicycle costs 130,000 baht. My case, 45 years ago, 350 baht, and I had to use it to go to school, to learn English. So, bicycle now, the craze, I think it's in your country too, is a lifestyle. In my case, it's a life necessity. Without that used bicycle that my grandma bought for me, 350 baht, I would not have had this education to go on to Harvard. Only because of the English language. So in many circumstances, it is a social equalizer at the same time. And now, all over the country, we are talking about competitiveness. We are talking about getting ready for competition. We are talking about opening up the country in the ASEAN community, outside ASEAN, trade, investment. We have to compete for everything. But we need to improve on the proficiency of the English language of our people. There are now 55 international schools in Thailand, Bangkok, and the provinces. And there are many, many bilingual programs around the country because the parents want the English language, because it is also an instrument to climb the ladder. Now, in your case, it may be, yes, I mean, a few years ago in this country too. English means upper crust. English means privilege. English means opportunities. But then when we went through many other changes and transformation and industrialization and investment coming in and opening up the country for competition, English has become a tool to climb the ladder. I would not have been here except for education. And I would not have had that education except for the English language that I master from the youth. And I was very confused growing up because my first English teacher was a British overseas service volunteer who taught me to say either or neither. Then, at the last 2 years of high school, American Peace Corps, Surin, no, either or neither. Then I came to Thammasat University, Canadian volunteer this time, who spoke with a slight French accent. Neither, either. So I got confused along the way, but at least people say now I have a global English. That is, can't really tell where my background, my English is from. Confused. So it is, in some circumstances, an elitist language of the elites. But in some circumstances, English can also be an equal and a social equalizer. A lot of people make a living out of English here in this country. And if you are an accountant and good in English, you will be working at a international corporation headquarters. If you're a lawyer, no English, you are just a country lawyer. So English is giving you that opportunity. Yeah. Yes, sir.
Well, perhaps I should put on my best Indian accent to speak to you in my next question.
Being at ASEAN for 5 years, I learned to identify all accents.
Very, very good. Very, very good. I think that the question I have is about ASEAN.
Yes.
I've been reading in the last, just the last week since I've been in Thailand, all about the different rifts in trying to forge a common identity.
Did you read one of mine?
Well, let's just say that I read some things. And I think one of the interesting things that I, just to be devil's advocate, as we like to be, is to say English had no role to play in the current split, if you like, that's happening in ASEAN. I was wondering whether you wanted to say anything about that.
You know, ASEAN is an aspirational community, always in search of a more perfect the next day. And it began with this tremendous diversity that I described earlier. The largest Muslim country is Indonesia, not Saudi Arabia, not Egypt, not Pakistan. India is number 2, yes. 4 adjacent, contiguous Buddhist countries, Theravada Buddhists are here, Myanmar, Thailand, Cambodia, Laos. The largest only Christian Catholic is the Philippines. And Bali is still Hindu. The island of Bali is 90% Hindu. And there are pockets of this and that. And the languages and the historical perspectives and experiences and governance. We have a very, very strong, almost absolute Brunei monarchy. We have 2 communist countries, Laos and Vietnam. Thailand is now, Myanmar used to be in this position, now Thailand. So there is that tremendous diversity. So, and yet we want to achieve, many things, not everything, but many things that the European Union as a community has achieved. On one thing we have done, and that is steady economic growth. But we could not go into the cultural governance norms that we are so diversified in. Otherwise, there won't be a community. So, for ASEAN, for your information, the speed of ASEAN 10 is the speed of the slowest member. If one stands aside, it won't go. You have to wait until that one said, okay, I will go. So at the speed that is that slowest member. So everything is incremental. Everything is step by step in order to stick together as a community. So we have to manage diversity, not manage the commonality among us. We have to manage the diversity more. And this certainly has given a lot of frustration to our dialogue partners. We have invented this thing called dialogue partnership. The Chinese are our dialogue partner. The European Union started with the bigger countries, the enemies, the former enemies. The French, the Germans, and the Italians got together, the big countries. And then the smaller countries, Belgium, Luxembourg, the Dutch, would come and join. We started differently. We started with the smaller countries in the middle and bring the giants in through dialogue partnership. And we have to manage that one too. So the landscape is extremely diversified. Henry Kissinger said, as far as economic development, growth, science, technology, innovation, commerce, East Asia, he said this at the end of last century. He said, East Asia is equivalent to 20th century Europe. But as far as institutions, processes, and system to manage their own fault lines and the differences among them, he said, East Asia is still 19th century Europe. Now, ASEAN happens to be in the middle of that. And it's the only platform that is legitimate, region-wide. And what we have is the convening power. We call a meeting, everybody wants to come. India, the Chinese, but the Chinese and Indians, the Chinese don't even recognize one of your states. You know that. Arunachal Pradesh your most eastern state is not recognized by China that it belongs to India. So a lot of historical baggage among the bigger neighbors. We try to manage that. So they come to us with a sense of comfort that we threaten none, we welcome all. But within ourselves, that solidarity, that one unity is also very much in urgent need now because of the pressures from outside. The Chinese and the Americans are now pre-positioning between themselves, among themselves. And the heat of that power play is going to be on the ASEAN platform because there is no other platform. So we find ourselves wobbling under that stress, under that pressure. But yes, you are right. If you want a community, you need to have that sense of solidarity and oneness. If you want a community, you need more than 25% trade among yourselves. We trade with the rest of the world 75%. We trade among ourselves only 25% because of the diversity among us. And yet, that's the only one that exists in the region. If you go back to Henry Kissinger, this is the only one platform that is now trying to bring the region together. So every power must respect this centrality or this leadership role by default or by design that ASEAN is playing. Because without this instrument, it's going to be very, very difficult. Imagine I have to work in that environment for 5 years and communicating with the 10 and with outside the 10 more. The UN is our dialogue partner. EU is our dialogue partner. India is our dialogue partner. China, Japan, Korea, Australia, New Zealand, all are in this web that we are trying to weave together. It's very difficult. But I survive. And unemployed now. Not sure yet when to stop, but with a high sense of concern that if you want this platform, this region, this space to be effective, you need effective communication tool and leadership who are convinced and who are capable of driving the region forward. I'm not sure if we have one emerging on the horizon. I'm not sure if the world can produce one that would give, inspiration to our part of the world, that we would need to develop our own effective, enlightened, and compassionate leadership that would bring the people along. We need your help. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. It seems the heat is on and everyone would like to discuss non-stop. Yeah? But thank you, Your Excellency. We find that we need to find out the communicative or constructive English communication for our generation or the children, and we don't want to seek another world or another planet to go, right? Okay, so it's now the time that I would like to invite Professor Itash. I would like to invite Professor Tony Young, okay, who is the President-elect of International Association of Language and Social Psychology, to present our token of appreciation to His Excellency, Dr. Surin. Okay. It's pretty heavy. For picture.